Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's session, which is all about maternity pay in Sage 50 Payroll. My name is Sarah, and I'm joined in the background by my colleague Duncan, who will be keeping an eye on the Q&A panel as we go along. So if you have any questions as we go, feel free to pop them in there. So we'll start with an introduction to statutory maternity pay. So we'll run through some of the key legislation and the qualifying conditions, and we'll also talk about reclaiming statutory payments and what makes you eligible for small employers relief. We'll then go into a demo on actually recording maternity details, so I'll show you a couple different places that you can record those details in Payroll, and how to check the amount of SMP that's been calculated for your pay period. We'll then look in the pay run at how to adjust your employees' payments. So we'll look at make up basic. So if you've maybe got a company maternity scheme and you're topping up to full basic, or by entering your own manual adjustments if they've maybe went off on maternity halfway through the month. We'll then finish off with the month-end process, so where you reclaim your statutory parental payments. So I'll show you where it appears on your P32 report, and how to submit your employer payment summary as well. And then we'll finish things off with some troubleshooting. So we'll run through some of the more common queries that we get around SMP and some top tips on how to avoid those issues as well. So with all of that said, let's get started with an introduction to SMP. So first of all, what does SMP stand for? Well, it is just short for statutory maternity pay. And this is just the minimum amount that you need to pay to qualify in employees when they're going to be taking time off work and they've had a baby. Now, SMP is paid at two different rates. So you've got the first 6 weeks. So for the first 6 weeks of entitlement, the employee gets the higher rate of SMP. And that is usually 90% of that employee's average weekly earnings. And then for the remainder of the paid maternity leave, so that's 33 weeks, they would get that at the standard rate. So that is just a flat rate of £187.18 per week for the current tax year, or 90% of their average weekly earnings. It is whatever is lowest. Now, just a heads up, we are a bit early, but it'll be here before we know it. It is due to increase to £194.32, and that is from April 2026. So something to bear in mind with this one is if you have lower paid employees, the 90% of their average weekly earnings, that would actually be the rate throughout the entirety of their maternity leave. So for most, 90% of their average is the higher rate, and then they'll go down to that flat rate for the 33 weeks. But if they are a lower paid employee, then likelihood is they're going to be on that 90% throughout the whole 39 weeks. Now, in order to qualify for this payment, the employees must be on your payroll in the qualifying week. And that's just the 15th week before the expected week of childbirth. They've got to give you the correct notice to start the maternity pay. So that is at least 15 weeks before the baby is expected. Your employees must tell you the date the baby is due and the date they want to start their maternity leave as well. They must give you proof that they're pregnant, and that's likely going to come in the form of a MAT B1 form, which you'll also use to enter the date in the system. They do have to be continuously employed by you, and that's for at least 26 weeks up to any day in the qualifying week. And then finally, they have to earn at least £125 a week gross in the 8-week relevant period. Now, this is the 8-week period prior to the qualifying week, and that will be used to calculate the employee's average weekly gross pay. And that will be used for both eligibility and also to calculate that higher rate that we talked about earlier. So I do know there's a lot of different dates going on there when it comes to any statutory parental payment. So I do just want to run through a little bit of a timeline of those different dates. So first key date is the due date, also known as the expected week of confinement. So that's a term you might see on the employee's MAP B1 form. And then if we look 15 weeks prior to that, we have the qualifying week. So that's 15 weeks before the due date. That'll be the start of their qualifying week. If we look 26 weeks prior to that, that's when we need the employee's start date to be. So it has to be at least 26 weeks before the qualifying week. And that's what we want to look at for the employee's eligibility to the statutory maternity pay. Now, if we go back to the qualifying week again and we look 8 weeks prior to that, that's when the average weekly earnings are going to be calculated. And remember, they need to be earning that £125 a week to qualify. And it'll also be used to calculate that higher earning period. We then look 11 weeks before the due date. That is the earliest that the leave could start. Can't start any earlier than that. However, it may be that the employee has been off sick already with pregnancy-related sickness. And if that is the case, then they would make the transfer to SMP 4 weeks before that due date. So that's if they're off and they're still off with pregnancy-related sickness, then that's when it would transfer to SMP from SSP. So just a handy graphic there, because I know that, like I said, there are a lot of dates going on. So definitely get the handouts downloaded if you haven't already. This is really good just to have for a quick reference. So most employers can reclaim 92% of their statutory payment. And remember, that is just parental payments, so SMP, SPP, and so on. That doesn't apply for sick pay, just a bit of a heads up there. So most employers can reclaim 92%. However, if you qualify for small employers relief, you can reclaim 108.5%. And that did increase quite a bit this tax year. It is due to increase again come April by 0.5%. So that'll actually go up come April 2026 to 109%. Now, if you're not 100% sure if you actually qualify for small employers relief, so you would usually qualify if your total Class 1 NICs are £45,000 or less, and that is in the tax year before the qualifying or matching week if you're looking at adoption. So with that said, I do just want to get jumped into payroll for a first demo. Just so you can see how easy it is to check your eligibility. And I would strongly recommend checking your eligibility before you actually start processing the parental payment, because you want to make sure this setting is in place before you start processing, as if you tick the box afterwards, it won't actually work retrospectively. So that's just something to be a little bit cautious about. So the employee that I'm recording maternity for is going on maternity this year. So I do want to look at last tax year. So I'm just going to change my processing date firstly to the last day of the tax year. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to go into my links just on the left hand side of my payroll there, and I'm going to go and run my P32 report. Now, I do want to run it for the entire year. So I'm going to change my criteria and run from months 1 through to 12. And the line I want to be looking for is line number 4, so my gross NI. And straight away, I can see that is well under the £45,000 criteria. So that does in fact mean that I qualify for small employers relief. So I've confirmed that I'm eligible. I'm now going to change my processing date back to what it needs to be. And I want to double check that I have that setting in place before I go ahead and process. So I'm going to go into company, just in the bottom left there, and then I'm going to go into settings. So once my settings have loaded, you can see I'm checking over on the right here. So eligible for small employers relief, 2025-26. And I can see that that box is ticked, ready for me to start processing my statutory payment. So I have confirmed my eligibility there, as I should have. I have checked and confirmed my eligibility for my small employers relief. So I'm now ready to start actually recording my maternity details. So there are a couple of things that you will need before recording the details. You won't be able to record it without these. So you will need the date that your employee wants to start their maternity leave. And remember, they should have given you plenty of notice for this. And you want medical evidence as well. So this will come in the form of a MAP-B1 form, and that will include all of the dates that you need to record the maternity correctly. So with all of that said, let's get jumped back into payroll. And record our maternity for my employee. So the employee that is going off on maternity is employee 1. Now, there are a couple of different places that you can record the maternity. Now, I do want to show you in the employee record first. So I'm going to go to employee and open up my employee record. And if I go along to absence and just down into SMP, just down at the bottom here. Now you can see I can fill out all of the dates here, and that will calculate my maternity. So that's one area of the program that you can enter the maternity details in. But I do want to show you another way, which does give you the option to print the details as well. So I'm going to go back to payroll. And you can see under my links on the left-hand side, I have an option for recording maternity there. Now you can see this screen's just a little bit more visual. And you can also print the key information out if you want to keep that for your records. So I have received my MAP-B1 form, so I can tick that I've got medical evidence received. The due date is the 10th of February 2026. And I'm going to check entitlement. And you can see over on the right-hand side there, I've got 3 nice big green ticks, which is exactly what I want. So I've got my MAP-B1 form, they've worked for me long enough, and they've earned enough as well. Now, they are going to have their last day of work on the 10th of January. And I don't have an actual date of birth or return to work date just yet, so I can actually leave those fields blank just for now. And you can see now that I've entered my last day of work for my employee, it has generated my entitlement just in the bottom right here. So you can see that we've got 6 weeks at the higher rate and 33 weeks at the standard rate. So it's split those out nicely for me. Now, we do have an option for some special circumstances, so you can see if the employee is absent because of a trade dispute, then we can pop that information in there. We can also flag if the maternity pay period has started early due to pregnancy-related sickness, and remember that is 4 weeks before the due date. And then we also have an option if the pay period has started early due to an early birth. So that's where you would find all of your special circumstances. None of those apply to me, so I can just cancel out of there. I can see what earnings have been factored in during my set period. So it looks like this employee got a bonus that's been factored in, which has bumped it up quite nicely. Shared parental pay won't show as an option just because I don't have a return to work date in there. But if you want to know a little bit more about shared parental pay, we do have a webinar coming up on that. So definitely have a look on that if you're wanting to know more. And then over on the right there, we have some key dates as well. So again, you can print this page out if you want to keep a record of the entitlement and the key dates. This is a really handy screen to log the information and to do so. So I've got all of my information entered there. I'm happy with it. So I can now save that in the employee record. So I'm going to save and close. Now I just want to double check that this is actually calculating. So I am going to jump into enter payments for this person. And if I check in the bottom right status bar there, I can see my processing date is set to what I need it to be. So 31st of Jan will be my pay date. So I'm just going to go along to this summary page. And I can see there, if I look at my payments, I can see my statutory maternity pay is calculating as it should be. Now, it might be that I want to view a breakdown of exactly what's being paid out. And with statutory payments in payroll, they are paid out until the processing date. So it may well be that that first period isn't full weeks. And if you do want a bit of a breakdown of that, if you double click on this cell here, we'll open up the maternity pay screen in the record. And I can go along to the entitlement tab. And that will tell me, based on my processing date, exactly how many weeks are being paid out. So I can see 3 weeks of the higher rate is being paid out this pay period. So that looks all good for me. So I do just want to pop back to the slides for a little bit of a recap so far. So we've had a MAP B1 form provided to us by the employee, which has got all of our key dates on there. And we have used the quick employee option, so under links, just on when you've got payroll selected, to enter those dates and calculate our entitlement. We did also look at recording maternity through the employee record. Remember, that was in the absence tab and in the SMP window. Once we'd recorded our details, we then went into enter payments and we double checked the statutory maternity pay amount by clicking on the summary tab. We then drilled down on that further by double clicking on the maternity pay cell and going along to the entitlement tab to see exactly how many weeks were being paid out based on our processing date. So that is our statutory maternity pay recorded, but it might well be that I now want to adjust my employee payments to either top that amount up or to account for hours or days worked in the pay period. So let's get jumped back into payroll. Still in enter payments for this one. So there are a couple of ways you can adjust your employees' payments. So first option, and this is what you would want to use if maybe you have a company maternity pay arrangement. So it might be that you top up your employees' pay to their full salary. You top up the maternity pay, sorry, to their full salary. So you would top up the difference so that there was no difference in pay. So you can see here, I do have a salary entered for this employee. So they normally get £4,166 gross. And I can see that my statutory maternity pay is lower than that. So I actually want to adjust my payment to take into account the statutory maternity pay and just to top it up to the full amount. Now, easy way I can do that is by using this make up basic option. And what that will do, that will automatically prorate the hours number value of my salary to take into account the statutory payment that I have entered. So if I just go to click on that now, and I'm going to say yes to confirm that I want to proceed with that. And you can see straight away in the summary page, my pre-tax payments has went down. And if I double check that in payments, you can see it has automatically adjusted my hours number value to accommodate that statutory payment. So that would be one way of adjusting your employees' payments if you've maybe got a company maternity pay scheme in place and you top it up to the full amount. I'm just going to pop that back to normal for now. Now, another way that you might adjust your employees' payments is if they've maybe worked some days in the month. Now, this is just one way of doing it. I do want to stress that this might differ depending on what arrangement you have in your particular company. So say, for example, my employee actually went off on maternity on the 10th. They actually did work some days in January, and I want to pay them for those days worked. So there was 22 working days in Jan, and they worked 7 of those days. So if I just do 7 divided by 22, you can see that has adjusted that amount for the days that they've worked. So it's going to top that up on top of the maternity payment. And that's maybe a common one to use if they have went off partway through a month or a week. Now, there is one other thing that I want to bear in mind, and that is the pension. Now, this employee is part of a pension scheme, and the pension scheme that they're part of does need the employer pension contribution to be based on their salary before they went on maternity. So I actually want to change their employer contribution to a fixed amount to make sure the statutory payment doesn't affect it. So I'm going to go into the employee record. I'm going to go along to pensions. I'm going to have a little look in my table here so I can see usually it is £59.40. So I'm going to go into manage schemes, edit, and I'm just going to pop that employer contribution to a fixed amount. And I might want to make a little note to myself just to give me a nudge to change that back as soon as they are off the maternity pay. So that is all of my adjustments made. So I am going to go ahead and update my records. Now I've already entered my payments for everyone else, done my pension assessment, and ran any pre-update reports as well. But in the interest of time, I am just going to skip ahead and update records. For my January pay period. and I'm going to submit my FPS as well. So that is January all done and dusted. Just while that FPS is sending, let's run through a little bit of a recap. So we recorded our maternity details. We then had a look and reviewed that and enter payments. We then took a look at the make up basic option. So remember, this is to adjust payments for company schemes that pay a specified amount. So if your company arrangement is that you top up the maternity to full pay, then make up basic is a really quick and easy way of doing that. We then looked at a manual adjustment using the calculator option within the hours number value. And that is to work out how much you need to pay for maybe the days or the hours they've worked if they have went off on maternity partway through a pay period. We then looked at pension adjustments. So we changed the employer contribution to a fixed amount. So employer pension contributions during SMP are usually based on the employee's normal pay. And we entered a fixed amount to override that calculated percentage. Now, something I do want to stress with this is if you're not 100% sure if your scheme allows that, so if your scheme is meant to be based on the employee's normal pay, my top tip, just get in touch with a pension provider and they will be able to clear that up straight away for you, depending on your specific pension scheme. So we are at the point where we have processed payroll. We've finalised our January pay period. So I do want to move on to what we need to do actually after processing our statutory payment. So simply two parts to this, that is running our P32 and then submitting our EPS as well. Now, EPS, you do want to submit your EPS by the 19th of the following calendar month. So just a bit of a heads up on that deadline. But your EPS is a running year-to-date submission. So just a bit of a heads up there. It won't show you the amount per period. It will be a running year-to-date total. So something just to watch out for when you are actually submitting the EPS. So let's get jumped back into payroll to finish that up for our January pay period. So nice successful message, my FPS has been submitted. So next thing I'm going to do is run my P32 report. So I can find that in my links just when I've got my payroll option highlighted. Go into P32 report. I'm going to run that for month 10. And I'm looking at lines 6 and 7. So I can see I have an amount in total SMP recovered. And I also have my NIC compensation on there as well. And that's a good sign to me because remember, I checked I was eligible for small employers relief. I ticked the box in my company settings before I actually started processing it. So that has put the extra on there automatically. So I can see that as there's an amount in line number 7. If I go down to the bottom, I can see I have my small employer statutory compensation percentage showing on there. So I have figures in line 6 and 7. So that is a good sign to me that yes, I do need to submit an EPS this pay period. So I'm going to close out with my P32. And I'm going to submit my employer payment summary. So again, you can get this from your quick links over on the left-hand side there, or you can get that through e-submissions and employer payment summary. So a couple of different places that you can submit from there, just whatever works for you. So I'm going to go into my employer payment summary. And it is the first option that I want to select. So you can see I am adjusting my payment to HMRC because I am recovering statutory payments. So that's going to be the one that is applicable to me. I'm going to select that option and click next. I can confirm my tax month, so tax month 10, and that is correct. And I will have until the 19th of February to submit for tax month 10. So I'm just going to continue through that. I can see I have my statutory maternity pay in there, and I have an amount in NIC reclaimed. And that's all looking correct for me. That's my running year-to-date total. So I'm going to continue through the wizard. Now, none of these other options are applicable to me, so I don't have CIS or apprenticeship levy. So I can then go ahead and just finish. Going to tick that box. This won't come up for you. This is just because we're in a demo environment. So if I continue through my employer payment summary and get that submitted, so HMRC know that I can now reduce my bill. And that's been submitted successfully. So that is my maternity recorded, processed and submitted over to HMRC to be reclaimed. So to wrap things up, I do want to finish off by running through some top troubleshooting tips that we have if you do run into any problems. So a very common one for SMP is if it is their second child. So it may well be that they've had SMP before. If they have, and you use the quick SMP option through links, you will see that message on the left-hand side. However, you do want to be a little bit cautious about this message. So if it is a current period of SMP, then it can clear down figures that you might not want it to. So my advice would be, if you are unsure while you're seeing that message, just click no, and then you can go in and review the dates and the information from there. Now, I do just want to show you a little bit of a demo on this. So I'm going to jump back into Payroll for now. So if I look at employee form, I've received a new MAP B1 form for them. And I would go into recording maternity just as I normally would. And you can see that message that we've seen in this screenshot is coming up. So I could say yes to that message and it would clear down the information and the year to dates. But I might be a bit unsure. I might want to review it a bit further and clear the figures down manually. So I am just going to select no to that message for now. You can see when I've selected no, it is actually opening up my page. And when I look at the dates, I can see, yeah, they are from a long time ago. So they're from 2020. So I can now go ahead and clear that information down. So if I were to clear down the information manually, I can close out of there. And I'm going to go into my employee record. I'm going to go along to employment and into YTD values. If I go along to statutory payments, you can see weeks paid, I have 39. And that is off that 2020 period of maternity. Now, the reason this doesn't clear down automatically is that statutory payments can go between tax years. So, of course, this isn't a figure that gets cleared down when you do your payroll year-end process. But not to worry, I can manually reset that to 0. Or I could have said yes on that prompt that I've seen initially, and that would set it to 0 for me automatically. But either way, it is just what you prefer. So I can save that record now, and that would be good to go for me to start processing for the new period of maternity. So that is a very common one and one to look out for, especially if it is their second child. So again, no SMP calculating. Has it been paid for a previous child? Solution for this one, you can either say yes on the prompt and that will clear the information, or if you do want to review things a little bit further and double check the dates, say no to the message and then manually remove weeks paid from the year-to-date values. So a couple different ways you can resolve that one. Another reason it might not be calculating is the average earnings too low. So solution for this one, use your quick SMP to check those average earnings. So in our example today, we had nice 3 big green ticks on the right, but if they're not eligible, it will tell you, and it will tell you why. And last one is manual statutory pay calculation selected. That is a common one, and I will show you a little bit of a demo on this because it is something to watch out for just in case it has been selected in error. So again, I want to look at another employee, so employee 7. I am expecting them to have maternity in February. They actually started maternity at the end of Jan. So if I go into that employee record, I'm just going to look at absence. You can see my dates look all okay. But if I was to check in my enter payments, on to summary, there is actually no maternity pay being calculated. So I'm going to go into the employee record. I'm going to go along to absence and back into SMP. And if I look in the bottom right there, yeah, I can see that tick box has in fact been selected in error. So I'm going to untick that and save the record. And you can see straight away that's now paying out the amount I would expect. So another one just to watch out for if you are running into some issues and there's nothing calculating at all. Now, that's a few examples if there's no SMP calculating at all, but it might be that there is some SMP, but the amount is more or less than you expected. So I did touch on this earlier, but has the correct processing date been entered? So remember, statutory payments are calculated up to your processing date. So if it's a little bit less or a little bit more than you expect, then that is something to watch out for. So definitely something to review, or even if you went out of payroll and logged back in, it might be that the date has reverted back to today's date and you just need to change it back. So definitely one to look out for, especially when it is January as well, because that does catch a lot of people out. And again, I did touch on this earlier, but is the 90% average weekly earnings actually below the standard weekly rate of the £187.18 per week? If it is, remember, they'll get that amount throughout the whole 39 weeks of their maternity. So yeah, definitely something to watch out for. And of course, you can review that in the record if you need to. So some top troubleshooting tips there. But with that said, that does bring us to the end of the content for today's webinar. I do want to finish things up just by running through some further support and time for questions as well. We do have some great upcoming webinars. So we have some more statutory payments, including sick pay and paternity pay and shared parental pay. And we have an intro to payroll and benefits, one more nominal link session and attachment of earnings as well. So we've got a nice variety going on there just before we get cracking with payroll year end. So definitely make sure to get registered for one of those and hopefully see you on one of those ones. The Help Centre is a great resource, so you can access this by clicking on the help icon just next to your reports in Sage 50 Payroll. You can access our technical support guides, our recorded on-demand webinars, and info on how to get in touch with our Fab Tech support team if you do need to. Next up, I do want to talk about the Community Hub. This is a 24/7 online forum for Sage 50 payroll users. It is the perfect place to ask questions. You can share your expertise and you can stay updated with the latest payroll news and connect with other payroll professionals on there as well. So if you haven't joined yet, visit communityhub.sage.com and become part of the conversation. And last but not least, I do want to shout out Sage Uni. You can do anything from bite-sized bits of learning to full certifications on there. So you really can do it all at your own pace. Best part is totally free to set up an account. So get yourself to sageu.com if you haven't already to explore. So with that said, I will jump onto mute just to give Duncan a hand with any remaining questions. So if there is anything else you want to ask, get it submitted in the Q&A now, and I will see you all shortly to wrap the session up. Hello again, everyone. I hope you've all enjoyed today's session. No new questions through, so I will go ahead and close the session down in the next minute or so. As you exit the webinar, you will see a short survey. If you can take a moment to fill that out, your feedback is really valuable to us. I would love to hear what you thought, what worked well, anything that could be improved, so we can keep making these sessions even better for you. We do love reading every bit of feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email later today. It'll have a link to today's webinar recording on there and information on how to register for any future sessions. But thanks again for joining me and Duncan today. Hopefully we will see you again soon, but it is goodbye for now.